Good morning, Bay Ridge. Welcome to another episode of After Hours. As I mentioned on Sunday, today I wanted to talk a little bit more about a man named Polycarp who was part of the church at Smyrna, and he was martyred, and we have a record of that martyrdom in a work called the Martyrdom of Polycarp. You can actually get it in this book, The Apostolic Fathers. You can find it on the internet for free as well if you look around. Polycarp was a man who lived from about 69 AD to around 156 AD. They're not certain of the exact dates, but that means he was alive at the time the book of Revelation was written. He very well may have been part of the church at Smyrna. He later on actually became the bishop of the church at Smyrna. So he probably was very familiar with the letter that we just looked at on this Sunday that the Apostle John wrote. The church at Smyrna actually recorded his death afterwards in the document we now know as the Martyrdom of Polycarp and sent it around to other churches to explain what had happened. Polycarp in his life was not only the bishop of Smyrna, he's recorded to have fought against heretics like Marcion, refuting their ideas. He wrote a letter to the church at Philippi, the same one that Paul wrote to in our New Testament. But near the end of his life, when Polycarp was around 86 years old, a persecution broke out against the church in Smyrna. This is the way it happened. Just there were sporadic waves of persecution, and one broke out. Many people died willingly, but a man named Quintus, we know actually, who had spoken very boldly and kind of almost volunteered himself to be martyred, actually broke down, recanted, and burned incense to the emperor as a result. But the people were still crying for more blood, and so they wanted Polycarp, who was the leader of the church there. He was urged by many of his friends and followers to flee the area and get away. He went out to a country home outside the city, but he had a vision of actually his pillow on fire, and he said, "God has showed me that I am going to be burned to death for the faith, and I refuse to flee any further." So he waited, and eventually soldiers showed up from the Roman proconsul. And when the soldiers came, he welcomed them into his home, and Polycarp actually set a meal out for them, told them that they could eat. He was not going to flee. He requested to be given some time to pray. He prayed, and then he was taken away and actually carried down to basically the Colosseum. In the stadium, there was a large crowd gathered where they were waiting to kill more of the Christians. And at that point, he was interrogated by the proconsul, who was named Statius Quadratus, but he was actually quite unfazed by the entire thing. He made some witty comments back and forth to the proconsul regarding what he would or would not say. And ultimately, the proconsul said, "Listen, I have consideration for your age. You're an aged man." He was 86 years old at the time, and they could tell he was old. And he said, "Just revile Christ and burn some incense to Caesar, and this can all be forgotten. And we don't care if you're a Christian, but just please do this so that we don't have to carry through it." But Polycarp famously said, "For 86 years I have been his servant, and he has done me no wrong. How can I blaspheme my king who saved me?" And that quote has kind of become a ring for the martyrs through the ages. So at that point, Quadratus felt he had no choice. He said, "I'm going to have to burn you." He threatened to burn him and said, "You don't want these fires." To which Polycarp responded, "Your fires are only temporary. The fires of God are eternal, and they wait for all who are unrighteous and who refuse Christ." So he refused. He actually told the soldiers when they were going to nail him to the pyre that they did not need to do that, that he would willingly stay, and that the God who had saved him by his grace would grant him grace to submit to the suffering. And so Polycarp was burned to death, martyred. They say he was also stabbed with a spear because the flames were not killing him quickly enough. And he had actually, some of his last words were, "Why are you waiting? Come do what you will." He showed great bravery to the end, and he is a fulfillment of Jesus' words to the church at Smyrna. He actually was one of the people of Smyrna who was martyred for their faith, but he attained a better life, a better resurrection, as it says in Hebrews chapter 11. And so though the story is tough, it can be encouraging for us that we have a faith that is not only worth living for, it is worth dying for. Polycarp set that example, and he encourages the rest of us, whether our trials and sufferings are large or small, that Christ is with us and we have an eternal reward that waits us. So I encourage you to be strengthened by the faith of Polycarp and others who have gone before us, even willing to die for the faith. because Christ will be faithful to his word. I hope you have a good week. Please continue to pray faithfully as we go through our 7 weeks of prayer, and I will see everyone later this week.